Good morning, everybody. This is Nancy Phillips. I'm the coordinator of the Illinois Family Resource Center, and we're doing a morning webinar called Addressing Family Chaos, How Family Recovery Begins. The Illinois Family Resource Center has started doing monthly webinars. Matter of fact, this month we're going to be doing two. We're struggling with some technology. Zoom doesn't seem to want to let us figure out what's going on with their chat. So if you have some comments, you might try adding them to the question and answer. Leanna Morgan, one of the Ross coordinators, is here with me and is going to be checking things and sharing in just a little bit. This is one of the webinars. I have done several versions of this over the years, and as we learn more and more about family and recovery and the importance of communities in that process, we keep wanting to share those things that we find. The Illinois Family Resource Center, we're going into our 9th year before long. Started out as a one-year project, and it has just kept growing, and it's been exciting to be a part of that. It is a statewide project that is funded basically through the Department of Human Services, the Division of Substance Use Prevention and Recovery, better known as SUPER. I have posted the website address here, and this is a new email address for me. If you have my old one and have been using it, that's fine. I still get those, but I will be using the Seed Council one right now from forward, and it'll eventually, people will link into that, I'm sure. The Resource Center was developed to really address issues. It started out as being an adolescent focus, and that came from SAMHSA. And then it has progressed over the years of looking at the whole age from 0 through the whole lifespan of how do we look at family issues that are related to substance use disorder, mental health issues, and now gambling disorder, which we definitely see is increasing as gambling has become legal in Illinois. And I am learning more and more about that. I have a little teeny tiny bit of life experience in the family with that. But my experience, my PLE that you will probably see next to my name oftentimes, next to my master's degree, next to my certifications, which I have two of, is the person with lived experience. And as a family member, I am that person through 4 generations of substance use disorder, mental health issues. I'm starting to see some gambling with one of them. We know that people with gambling disorder, about 80% of them also have a substance use disorder of some kind or in some manner. So they really are linking together, and we're seeing more and more of that. The goal of the Resource Center is to provide information about resources and research and new things that are out there that we can share, and strategies and ideas. It's an opportunity to share. And we do this with human service providers, for parents, significant others, for communities, through a variety of methods. And in the last year, we've really expanded the areas that seem interested in this. And I'll share some of that as we kind of go through this. We share this information through website postings. We have our website, and we've just done a big update of that in this last month. All the webinars that we'll be doing on a monthly basis are being recorded, and they are now being linked into the website. So there is a webinar library. You can go online and pull up past webinars and view those. They will be in the YouTube channel that is linked into the website. I do a Facebook page, so about 5 days a week I post either something motivational or a resource or an idea that helps families stay healthy, helps families move forward. It can address the holidays that we're going into. It can look at the different things that impact families. We just post a variety of things so that people can go, oh, that's a good idea. I even post a lot of activities from Sesame Street and PBS, because they have some wonderful things that can help support family interaction and relationship, especially for kids that are living in a sense of chaos. We're doing monthly webinars. We do webinars on request. If you have a webinar that you want and you want it delivered to your specific service area, get in touch with me. We'll be glad to work with that. I send out the postings of the new ones coming up. We have them scheduled now through June. I'm also doing webinars for other organizations. I'm doing a series of webinars for CASA, the court-appointed advocate for our children that are involved in court services. They have about 3,000 volunteers around the state, and so we're doing a series of webinars for them around how do you help take care of the families, how to provide resources to the families, how to interact with the children, and to help them understand more about substance use disorder and mental health issues that impact these families. I can do technical assistance. I can facilitate meetings if you need some help with that. We also have done individualized in-service presentations. I used to do a lot of those in person, and then the pandemic hit, and that converted to Zoom. But the interesting thing around that, I love the person-to-person. I would love to be with you guys in person. That would be my goal. But it's also a good way to reach a lot of people at one time is through the webinars. The in-service presentations, we can take the same topics that we're offering in our general webinars, which is general information to hit anybody in the community, from the lay person to the professional person. It's the basics of what's the information you need to know around a specific topic, and we can individualize that to the group, to the organization, to the agency, to what they need around that topic, and I'm more than glad to do that. I also do a lot of conferences and exhibits. Last fall, I did 6 workshops in the field at 3 different conferences, and we exhibited at all of them to get the information out there that families living in this chaos can move forward. They can take care of themselves. They can be a wonderful asset to the person that they care about that's experiencing the disorder. And it's also part of helping educate people about substance use disorder and mental health and gambling issues, and the impact not only on the person experiencing that, but on the family. And a lot of with that goes a lot of research information. I read lots of information. I find all these little linkages that are really nice to share, and some of those will be coming up in this presentation. What I wish for you out of this is to learn the services offered by the Family Resource Center, and I just went through that. Become familiar with various family issues of substance use disorder, mental health, and gambling. For many of you, I look through the list of people here, I see some familiar names, and I see lots of new people that I haven't met. And I hope that this becomes a regular event for you as you follow our webinars. And you can email me, and we can have some connections there. But we'll be experiencing some investigation of family issues, taking a look at that, look at strategies to support families and the communities. As we have moved through this whole idea of family, getting help and getting support, the thing that's been exciting to me, having spent my whole life as one of those family members, is the fact that it impacts the community, and communities can have a big impact on how the family support systems work. And we'll talk about some of that, and Leanne is going to share some information here in just a minute. Then I hope you can identify one, one strategy or action that you can use to share resources available for families. Even if it's virtual support, think about how this information impacts you. If you're a family member that's signed on, if you're a grandparent or someone giving kin care that saw this and said, hey, this looks interesting, maybe I need to sign on to that. If you're part of an agency, an organization, a faith-based organization, probation, legal in some way that is signed on here, we will offer some basic information and then some strategies that you can build on at a later time. Okay, I'm just gonna pause right here because I want to introduce you to Leanna Morgan, who is a ROS coordinator. Leanna, are you ready to share some information? As a ROS coordinator, I have a real passion for ROS. I've worked with them since day one in some of the original planning in the state, and it's exciting to me to see this happening. And so we have decided that as part of the webinars, we will introduce people to what ROS is. So Leanna, I'm going to turn it over to you for a few minutes.
Hi, I'm Leanna Morgan. I'm the ROS coordinator for Douglas County in Illinois. It's part of the East Central Illinois ROSC under lead agency of Our House, which is also known as Seed Council. The East Central Illinois ROSC is funded in part or whole by DHS and Super. ROSC, if you don't know, it stands for Recovery Oriented Systems of Care. It's a coordinated network of community-based services, improving health, wellness, and quality of life for those at risk of alcohol and drug problems. With involvement from people in recovery, their families, and community, ROS continues to improve the access to quality of services and promote recovery-oriented activities such as prevention, intervention, treatment, and post-treatment. We rely on community partnerships so we can support those seeking help and provide support needed for recovery. It helps us to knock down barriers and reduce the stigma around substance use disorders. Our councils look at more effective strategies for helping people enter recovery and supporting their long-term recovery, which would actually lead to a healthier community for everyone. And I do, since I can't put it in the chat, I'm going to also ask Nancy to share our information so that if you wanted to contact myself for Douglas County, Illinois, or any of the others with the East Central Illinois ROSC, if you have additional questions for us, feel free to reach out. We're more than happy to answer your questions. I guess I should also tell you the counties that we serve. So East Central Illinois ROSC covers Clark, Coles, Cumberland, Douglas, Edgar, Effingham, Moultrie, and Shelby counties. If you're not in those counties and you still have questions, please still reach out to us. We're more than happy to help with answering questions or even link you to a ROS coordinator in your area. There's ROS coordinators all over the state. So everybody's definitely happy to answer any questions. If you want to look at our website, we're on the Governor States University. If you look up on there under Recovery Oriented Systems of Care, there are lists of all the ROS Council networks. So you can also look for people on there as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Leanna. We are really struggling with this chat thing. We haven't found the answer. We've had struggled with that before. Zoom just doesn't want to cooperate with us on that, but by the next time we will have this mastered, I'm sure. I will send out some information when I send the certification and the follow-up information. We'll make sure that there's information attached with that to the ROSC and maybe even a statewide listing since people come from different areas, and then you can contact your ROSC. I want to just do a quick definition of substance use disorder. I think that kind of puts us all on the same page because we have a very, very diverse background with the people that are in attendance. Substance use disorder is defined as a chronic relapsing disorder characterized by compulsive drug seeking, and that includes alcohol. And drug seeking and use despite adverse consequences. And it's considered a brain disorder. It was interesting. I've been in this field for almost, well, it's been over 40 years. So I have seen all the different ideas of what substance use disorder or the past used term addiction is. But we know that it's a brain disorder. It involves functional changes to the brain circuits. It changes the brain neurons, the way they function, the chemicals that go back and forth. Those brain circuits are involved in a reward, stress, and self-control role. And when you add other substances, it changes. The thing that's unfortunate is oftentimes those changes can last a long, long time after a person has stopped taking the drugs. That healing process takes time. You'll see some pretty good success pretty quick, but then you will start to see some residual effects of that. And it also depends on what substance the person has used, how long they've used, and what age they started using. The younger they start using, the more potential for long-term issues. I want to share some thoughts on substances overall, and this is good information for families. If you're working with families, it's important that you know this, but we can't talk about families without also addressing the person that is experiencing the issues. So substance misuse is a long-term misuse of drugs or alcohol. And what we know in looking at the research on families and children and the impact is this often includes parents and caregivers who consume harmful amounts of alcohol or other substances, are dependent on alcohol, use drugs regularly and excessively, are dependent on drugs, and it includes parents who aren't able to supervise their children appropriately because of their substance use. So if you're talking about misuse, these things are all very much a part of that, and a part of that definition of that. The thing that we need to be looking at when it comes to family and why the Family Resource Center was established is the family has a central role to play in treatment of any kind of health problem. And that includes substance use disorder, mental health, and family. Families are an important part of making decisions around if it's heart disease, if it's diabetes, if it's cancer. We involve families as best we can as a support system. And somehow or another, this field has not embraced it quite as strongly. We talk the talk, but we don't necessarily get that work done. And it's not helpful to the person that's working on their recovery journey. Family work's become a strong theme of a lot of treatment approaches, which is a positive thing. But one of the main challenges we see is to get it broadened to where it's just an accepted piece of treatment, no matter where you go and by all people and within the communities. Communities accept that as being part of a recovery journey for the entire family, not just the person experiencing substance use disorder or mental health or gambling issues. I will say my husband's got 40-some, he knows I talk about him. Has 40-some years of recovery. And one of the things that really brought me into the field, because I was doing, had a child care center at the time, and I fell in love with this field, was the fact that I was invited as a family member, not like you would see today, not with the formal treatment approaches, but I was invited in to learn more about it and to be included in that process of him starting his recovery journey, which has been 40+ years. So we know that recovery happens, and it is wonderful and it's possible. So for practical purposes, family can be defined according to the person that's experiencing the substance use disorder or the issues that need to be addressed. Those emotional connections, they aren't necessarily just biological. They aren't just the parents. They aren't just the spouse. It's the people that are the closest to them and that can be a positive support system or have an emotional attachment. One of the things, I'm going to check time here. One of the things that I want you to think about while we're talking about this is, what do you think family members are feeling? Those of you that are on here, I would say probably 50 to 70% have had some kind of experience in what we're talking about. This field draws people in that have lived experience either as a family member or a person in recovery themselves. So what are family members feeling that you may be working with, you may be interacting with, maybe on your committees, maybe in your community? What are the family behaviors? And one of the important things are, what are the family survival skills? And we'll talk about that just a little bit more here pretty soon. And then how's the family supported within the community? What's happening in the community? That's what's so wonderful about Ross, is we're starting to look at the community as a whole and all those different spokes of the wheel that are important in creating a healthier community that in turn support not only people experiencing substance use disorder and the other issues themselves, but the families and people that care about them. I'm going to jump back to an old model that has been updated and it's still used. And this is one that Claudia Black has out of one of her books, really looking at the roles and the impact on the family. We have the family hero, which is the person that feels like they take on all the burden of the chaos that's going on in the family. And oftentimes they will withdraw from the family unit and have an identity of themselves as a child or as a family member that's very positive, very strong. And that part of that reason is to distract from the chaos that's going on in the family. Then we have our scapegoat. This one, bless its heart, is oftentimes headed for problems of itself. Its reaction and way to handle the trauma and the issues and the chaos is very negative, acting out behaviors. And depending on the age, what we see and how they experience it. If you aren't familiar with Claudia Black's work, I encourage you to take a look at it. She has an updated book of working with families and has a lot of this information. It's worth taking a look at, and I will share my email address here again in a minute. And the first person to email me, I'll send you a copy of that book. There's the mascot, and if you only have 1 or 2 or 3 people in the family, these roles are going to get meshed, and they may change over time. The family hero is usually the older one. The scapegoat comes in there somewhere. The mascot is really like the class clown. They may turn everything into a joke to distract from the chaos that's going on in the family. The other thing is the lost child, and this is often the youngest child. They withdraw. They don't become a part of the whole. Trauma is very hard on them that comes from the chaos that they may be living in. And then we also have the chief enabler, the person that may have some codependency, is managing all this, struggling with it. And it's often the spouse, the parent, depending on who the person with the substance use disorder is. And I think it's worth taking a look at that. Sometimes the names may change, but this model is still used by a number of people. And I see it coming up in a lot of the research I'm doing. I'm going, oh, very familiar. They just changed the role or the name of the person. So when you start looking at the outcome and the behaviors of all that, this is what family chaos looks like. I've lived in it for 4 generations in different ways. There's worry, there's fear. You get frantic at times. Oh, my child didn't come home last night. I know they were out with this bunch of kids. Or my spouse didn't make it home from work last night, or we're overdrawn at the bank. I don't know what to do. Where did they spend the money? Children get promises that are broken. There's shame, embarrassment, guilt. You get protective of what's around you if you're living in that chaos. Confusion, anger, and a lot of times that anger is pushed down, which is not healthy for any of us, the stress that creates. You may become over responsible. Partially that's because you're fixing everything that's not getting done by the person that's impacting the family environment and is creating the chaos. Sometimes there's even abusive behaviors as part of it. Try and rescue. One of my roles way back when, 40-some years ago, I was very good at calling into work saying that my husband was sick. And I probably was denying what that sickness was too. It's part of being sucked in. You're part of that chaos and part of that manipulation without even knowing it's happening. And I think that's what's important, that we recognize that and help give families support to move on past that. Family members can get better. They can take care of themselves. They can have a much healthier lifestyle and environment, even if the person they care about isn't ready for that or is struggling with that. And it's not always the easy thing to do, but it definitely is possible. We know that there's oftentimes a breakdown in communication, neglect of self. When it gets really chaotic, sometimes you just don't take care of yourself. You don't have fun in anything. There's that constant sense of sadness. And you can be in a crowd of people and still feel lonely because you think nobody else understands the stress or the chaos you're living in. And it is very exhausting. When I found this slide right here that I added in here, I'm going, this is it. You just start looking at all these things and these are part of it. And the thing that really I wanted to bring up is interesting is this is not just behaviors and feelings that families have, it's survival skills. When you're caught up in that chaos, it's very easy to just, in order to survive, these are things that you're feeling and behaviors that you're experiencing. And those of us that support families, if we understand that, we can help them start to move past that just being a survival skill and build on that. One of the things that I think is important for us to know too is that we know that parental addiction, and I need to change that terminology because as we look at the stigma, we're trying to reduce using the term of addiction, and it would be parental substance use disorder, can be associated with child neglect and abuse. It's often associated with, and it often happens, but we need to understand that it's something to be cautious of, and that you don't overreact, but yet you're very caring and keep children safe. We know there's been an increased demand for child welfare services. We see the Drug Endangered Child Alliance, that's a national program, and we're starting to get a number of local ones established here in Illinois. And if you're interested in more of that, be sure and email me or contact me. We can let you know more about how to get information on that. And it's how our communities can come together, the people in the communities come together and take care of our children that are impacted by the drug endangered environment they may be living in. In the US, over 8 million children have at least one parent with a substance use disorder. And we know that that's probably undercounted because a lot of these children have not been identified. Oftentimes they're left with grandparents, which brings up this next slide. And the grandparents take over that role, or somebody else in a kinship role. And there's no formal reporting of that. So it's very possible that that count is much higher. We know that there's an increase in grandparents raising grandchildren and other relatives, and I am one of those people. I've been through 2 generations of that due to various reasons. It can be due to the death of a parent, parents away in military, the child themselves was having problems in his or her social environment and needs a change. That's often due to trauma that's been created. But more often than not, when you start looking at all the research that's out there, there's definitely a connection between alcohol and drug abuse and the neglect part of the parents that may be creating the need for grandparents raising grandchildren. I put down a resource at the bottom that is absolutely phenomenal, and that's Grandparents Raising Grandchildren. This came out of the Generations United, and this is one of their links on their website. That's does a yearly report and takes a look at what's the status of our families and the status of our children being raised by relatives or other kin, and it just keeps increasing. So taking a look at that community-wide is really important. Looking at the effects of parental substance use on children, this is a good view. This came out of Generations United because it also tells us what is the chaos and what are the issues that are going on in families, period, for the adults that are also dealing with the chaos. And if we look at home life, it's often unpredictable. There may be potential exposure to illegal activities. It's more common than you may realize, especially if you're out in the community and not working directly with families through an agency or an organization that provides services around substance use disorder. Inconsistent parenting and lack of appropriate supervision, inconsistent emotional responses from parents to children. And that is very concerning because that has a lot to do with the effect of trauma on children. And we know there's research out there, and I have read it, I've got the articles filed, that trauma at age 2 months has an impact. And part of that's that bonding that's missing oftentimes, the inconsistent emotional responses that children then carry on into their preteens, teens, and adulthood if it's not addressed. So we need to take a look at that. There's secrecy about home life. Don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. We'll address that in just a minute. That's very much a part of the home life for children where there's substance use. And parental behavior that may make the child feel guilt or shame. It's easy to say, if you just behave, then I wouldn't have to drink. If you just do this, then if you just pick up this house, then I wouldn't be so upset. There's all that happens, and it happens with adult to adult relationships where there's substance use disorder and mental health. Looking at emotional challenges, children develop feelings of believing they have to be perfect. You know, if I'm always told I wouldn't drink or I wouldn't use if you did this or that, they become thinking they need to be perfect. I had a little bit of that in my dad's alcoholism. He was a very highly functioning alcoholic, but I can remember those feelings growing up of I have to be perfect in order to make him happy because we have to look perfect on the outside. Believing they have to parent their parent, that happens more often than you think. When I supervised outpatient services for a number of years, we saw more of that than I would have expected to. Clients coming in that they themselves had grown up in an environment, a generational effect of feeling like they needed to parent their parent, and then in turn realizing that maybe their children have assumed that same role. There's difficulty in trusting others and maintaining that sense of attachment, and that's so important for all of us, not just our young people, but our adults. Difficulty achieving positive self-esteem, and oftentimes the result is extreme shyness or aggressiveness. And then adjustment difficulties. Children who grow up in inconsistent environment or with limited guidance are more at a risk to question rules or authority. Talk about our scapegoat and our mascot in the roles we talked about before. That is oftentimes where this child would fit as far as their behavior, that resistance to rules or authority. Higher risk of experimenting or using alcohol or other drugs themselves. Sometimes they just withdraw from society, and they have difficulty building healthy relationships with peers, adults, and others. They may build relationships, but it may be with others that are experiencing the same thing they are. We're talking about, we want to see health and wellness happen. The one thing that I do want to be sure and share is living in a household where a parent or a caregiver misuses substances doesn't mean that the child's necessarily going to experience abuse, but it means that the parent doesn't have those nurturing skills as strong, very likely as strong as what we would like for healthy development. It's amazing to me how children are so attached to their parent, no matter what their experience has been. So if you're in a situation where you're helping remove a child from that environment, et cetera, be aware that this child is experiencing trauma over that, because children have a tendency to want to return to really unhealthy situations because it's their parent. There is that bond there that is this wonderful but unexplainable bond, and you wonder, how can it exist in some of the environments that our children experience? But parents struggling with substance use disorder and mental health oftentimes have some abuse or neglect with their children, and it's not that they do it because they want to hurt their children, it's part of the illness. Looking at children in kinship and grand families, this is from the last year's report out of Generations United. The other one just came out about 2 weeks ago, and I haven't had a chance to change my slides. But the number of children nationally that are living in a house where the grandparents or another relation, relative, are the head of the household, and that parent isn't part of it, is up in the millions. And this number up here, the 7.6 million, in a year's time has gone up to over 8 million. In the United States, for every child being raised in kinship care or foster care, there are 18 children that have, the data has been generated, about 18 that are being raised outside of the formal system. And then in Illinois last year, we were a little better, thank goodness. It was 10 being raised by kin outside of foster care. But there's still several 100,000 children in just the state of Illinois that are living in homes where their parent is not the head of the home, the parent isn't even there, or they have gone through the legal system and have been placed in formal care. So this is all part of the fallout of substance use disorder and the chaos. This is pretty much the same thing. I do think it's a good resource for you. The Handbook for Shame and Guilt, the Treatment of Alcoholism, Addiction, Family Involvement, and Recovery. I like this book. She even ties every aspect of what you can imagine of issues around substance use disorder and chaos in the family, and links it with how people can start to get that. It even addresses co-workers that are impacted by people with substance use disorder and mental health. And she ties part of her resources into 12-step programs and different things that you can use as suggestions, specific suggestions of how to start referring people and helping them get help. We know in families, these have been around for a long time and they still exist, the family rules. And these are survival skills. Don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. I can remember growing up with these rules in my house. Basically, we keep it a secret by not talking to anyone outside the family about the chaos and craziness. That part of that's that shutting down, that's withdrawing. You don't have friends over, you don't have family over, because you don't want to talk about it. And it goes with the stigma that is attached to the issues of gambling and mental health and substance use disorder. We people that have gone through this and have helped ourselves get healthy and have a commitment to our communities and our families need to understand we need to start sharing our stories of success and sharing what works and bring people together. And that's a lot of what Ross does. So if you don't know where a Ross Council is, we will be sending out some of that information when we follow up here. Link in and become part of that support for your community and the families in it. Don't trust. You don't have trust feelings, behavior, promises. One of the big things that I know I experienced, and I think that my children did until my husband went into recovery. He's doing well. I still got him, same guy, is the promises that weren't carried out. Mine was I was always going to get a train ride. My dad said, yes, I will take you on a train ride. We'll hop on a train. I always wanted to do that. And it never happened until I became a professional and I took Amtrak between Mattoon and Chicago. And I've done that many times. And the last one is don't feel. And this is where it's really traumatic, is you shut down your feelings of reality. You turn off your emotions. Because if you're always feeling scared, if you're always feeling anger, if you're always feeling like you have to be perfect and haven't made it, if you're being told that you're the reason they're using, you just have to shut down sometimes. And if it's too severe, and if it's too scary, and if it's dangerous, then you don't talk, you don't trust, you don't feel, and you don't get the help that you need. This is some information that I think makes sense, and this is good. Oh, I'm looking at the time. Yes, I like to talk, so we're going to get to some resources here in a minute. Looking at thoughts and feelings, I was very fortunate to have been part of this process, part of this pulling this together for what is now known as Prevention First, a publication called Breaking the Chain, and looking at the generational issues of substance use disorder and mental health, and how it impacts the family and how they function. And this fits with the don't talk, don't trust, don't feel, and helping understand that's how the people you're working with are experiencing life can help you start to move things forward. If the pain of the chaos is not validated, if you try and talk to someone and they don't believe you, if a child goes to a teacher and said, my mom was drunk last night and didn't feed me, and I didn't know where to go or what to do, and the neighbor came over and helped us and got me to school today, and that person doesn't respond and treats it like it never happened, or they go tell another family member and that family member's in denial. If it's not validated, then they can't move forward to be comforted. And that comfort is, I don't have anyone to keep me safe. What do I do? And there's where our trauma is created. And then it's not resolved. And we know that those three things have to happen for trauma to be addressed and to be taken care of. This is from 20 years ago, folks, when we weren't using the word trauma as much, but it is the absolute model of, if it's not validated, comforted, and resolved, those survival skills we were using is just going to build more and more trauma. The other thing that's really prevalent, and I'm not going to go through this now, especially with the time, but I'm going to share what's coming up, is looking at grief. Grief's often experienced by people living in this chaos, not just the person experiencing it themselves, but definitely family members and the environment. Grief isn't recognized because we say, oh, that's because of the using of this person. That's because of the using of that one. You're feeling this as it's related to whatever, but more and more the research is coming out and being recognized that not only if we're working with families that are experiencing chaos from substance use disorder and their survival skills, we need to be looking at the grief process they're going through too. Very similar symptoms, but we need to be taking a look at how do we address both of those. And it's really important. And that leads us to the January webinar we're going to do. It's families looking forward, moving through grief and chaos, whether that's because of incarceration or death or somebody's relapsed or the other things that happen in that chaos that may cause grief. We can start looking at how do you move through that and how do you create a healthier lifestyle as a family and a family member and a community. So we'll be sending out linkages to register for this with all your information. I just put this in here because SAMHSA put out this model of stages of recovery, looking at an individual attaining sobriety, and at the same time, the family system's probably still unbalanced, but they begin to recognize that there can be behavior change and they can become healthy themselves, even if this person doesn't go ahead and follow through with the sobriety at that time. The next stage is looking, how do you adjust to sobriety? How do you balance your life? How do you get in your 12 steps or whatever your recovery model is? How do you get to treatment? How do you put things back together? How do you adjust to that? Because it's a very different lifestyle. And it's often different for men and women. And the way that they fit into their environment. We know for the family, They have to work on developing a new system. What do you do? How do you take care of yourself? How do you get to your own meetings, such as Al-Anon or Celebrate Recovery, or something that helps you move forward no matter what else is going on, so that we can start to balance that. And then the last stage that they had identified is long-term maintenance of sobriety. And there's many ways of doing that. Many people, of course, it's through the 12-step approach or self-help. We know families stabilize a new and healthier lifestyle, that they have created their own way of staying healthy, and then the two can start to merge. I like this model. And this is out of what's called the TIP manual by SAMHSA, Family Therapy Can Help, and it's the TIP model 39. You go online to SAMHSA and you can pull the whole manual down. One of the things that's really important, okay, we've got 12 minutes here, that I want to get across is language is important, and we have found more and more that that's true, that it's part of addressing the stigma that's out there, so that family members are willing to get help, so that people experiencing substance use and other disorders themselves get help. And one of the things that I just always like to share is, over the years, we used to talk about dysfunctional families, and that term's still used a lot. When I first started in this field, it kind of shocked me, because I thought, I'm doing okay, my husband's doing okay, my kids are doing okay. And we weren't ever dysfunctional, we just weren't healthy. We didn't know what it was we needed to do. And talking about a family being dysfunctional has a tendency to pull them down and lay stigma onto them. But addressing a family's unhealthy behaviors, because it's on a continuum where you can start to move and build on that, it's just one example of starting to look at how we use our language. We know families are important because they have a decision-making role. They can help choose services, supports, providers. They can help set goals for treatment and recovery. And if they themselves can get into treatment and work on their own issues, etc., you've got two things going there that really have a positive outcome, and then support the community at large. Families can help monitor progress. They can help make funding decisions. They can help determine the success. And they can promote family recovery to other people. They can share their stories. And they're also important because you can gather information to help design programs. Benefits of integrating families into services, even if it's not formally, but help getting them educated, getting them into support services of some kind that can help them focus on a healthier lifestyle and taking care of themselves. Benefits for family, treatment outcomes, your client recovery is going to be better, family recovery, generational impact. We know there's so many generational issues around substance use disorder and mental health, and we can start to change those and create a healthier environment. Benefits for providers, if you're actually going into services, is there's reduced resistance if there's family support for that. There's more flexibility in treatment planning. You can look at, do they need residential? Do they need outpatient? Are they going to have a ride to outpatient from the family? Is the family going to be willing to work with them? Is the family going to be willing to give up the time while they go to their self-help groups, rather than just pulling them back in and expecting all this family time and not understand the importance of both? Flexibility in the treatment approach and an increased skill set for all of them. Now, families may ask several things. What's in it for me? Why do I need this information? How can I benefit from it? I remember thinking all those things when my husband went into treatment. Even though I was invited to come and learn more about it, it was kind of like, I've got 3 kids at home. Who's going to take care of them? How do I do that? How will it make me a better person? How will all this fix in my case, it was a spouse. And how will it help my family and community? At that point in time, we were really looking more at family, but now we need to look at how can that help build our communities? We know it can. Barriers that interfere with family involvement, and looking at ways to go around that. Family history, especially if it's generational. I don't want anybody to know what was going on. I don't want to share anything. People know my family history. I don't want to get out there. Indecision about actions, negative labeling, the stigma. The stigma in this field is getting better, but we're a long way from having solved that. Family strengths may get overlooked. We need to meet families where they are and look at those strengths and build on those. Neglecting cultural and gender implications is also a barrier. Families' perception of hopelessness. Oh, I've been down this road 20 times. I've heard this from parents, especially when their adolescents were coming in. I'm not coming in again. Quote, I've done this before. Why do I want to come in again? This time it's up to them. It's a barrier, and working through that is not easy. You have to be careful of your language. You have to be careful of how you build rapport with that family member so they feel safe. Fear of failure. I've been down this road before. It scares you to death. Limited access to resources and support. A lot of that's, and limited finances. That's still an issue. I mean, there are ways to resolve that, but it's still very overwhelming sometimes. I ran into this with one of my family members, younger ones, that at this point I can't help because I don't have that kind of funding, and the finances have been limited, especially through the pandemic. It's not that the finances weren't there, but the right place to go that the money would support was often very difficult. And then despair and distrust of our whole healthcare system. Don't you think about a strategy that you might apply in your role? And if our chat was working, I'd have you actually list some of those. But it's important that you leave here with one thing in mind, one simple thing, knowing that we have person-centered and family-driven care is important. I'm not going to go into, we've got some of this posted, but I'm not going to go into this right now. Knowing how adults learn and techniques that are important so that you can pull them in. We know that language and body language is so important. Role model behaviors, active listening, empathetic listening, non-judgmental behavior on your part is extremely important to pull families in and support them. We know adults are babies with big bodies. They don't like to argue with their own data. So if I say I've been down this road before, it's not going to work, don't argue with me. How do you change the language that you're using to make them feel safe, to become involved, to do what they need to do to get themselves better and to move forward? Learning is directly proportional to the amount of comfort and the fun that you're having. And learning won't take place until it hasn't taken place till behaviors change. It's not an easy road working with families, and especially getting them to come in. I'm going to go ahead and move through this. I want you to think about what are the roles in the community support recovery, and think about your community and what you do. And if you're part of a ROS system, by all means, take a look at who's involved there. And Leanna, if you have something to throw in, we've only got 5 minutes, but I think if you think of something that could be important around that ROS contribution that we can look at from the community that support family recovery, by all means, just break in here and let me know. One of the things that we need to do is focus on solutions rather than problems. We need to support parents and caregivers. And it's not just for children, this is for everybody. What are referrals to services? How do you get people referred to services? What are transportation issues, especially in rural areas? And having grown up in a rural area, and ours isn't as rural as some of the surrounding counties are, it's an issue. Virtual access. We are coming out of a pandemic with still lots of Zoom meetings and groups being done. Yeah, Leanna?
So I just wanted to add, just because you're saying, focusing on solutions, one thing that people can do is go to a local ROSC meeting and give some advice on your ideas of what you think would be helpful to fix these problems. Or maybe that's not a problem that they're looking at because they don't know. Maybe somebody just needs to bring that idea to the table to look for that solution. That's basically what we do, is we talk about the problems and try to find solutions for them. So if if someone looks at the website I mentioned earlier, they can see what their local Ross Council might be and contact that person and ask to come to those meetings and help with those conversations.
Exactly. I think that the fact that Illinois, the Division of Super, has really said we are going to work toward getting a Ross Council in every county, and every few months, a few more are added. And I actually did some coaching with some new ones at one point, and they do assess and can start helping address all these issues, looking at housing, medical, financial, legal. This is all important. So if you're out there, either professionally or as part of a community, take a look at those ways to help. Younger children need to be taken to nursery school. If you have someone coming out of treatment or someone that may be in there and are in grandparent care, those grandparents may need some help. How can your Ross Council, how can your community, how can your organization help with that? Help see that older children aren't missing school, that there's support for their schoolwork, that they get to their medical appointments and checkups. These are all things that get lost in that chaos of coming out of that. Another thing is listen without judging, offer services, educate when appropriate. I know that as I traveled around the state before the pandemic and did in-services, oftentimes people would say, we called too often to check on them. They don't like being pestered. So put balance in the things that you support. Suggest self-help support. Connect to a Ross Council. And I want to share this because the East Central Illinois Ross came up with this for the holidays. And if nothing else, I think this is really something that could be important for you to tuck away, to think about ideas that you can offer to a family or to a person that's on a recovery journey. Attend a recovery meeting. Talk to someone who supports recovery. Avoid isolation. Have an escape plan. If you're going to a party or an event, evaluate whether you should be there or not, and then also have an escape plan. Avoid toxic or stressful situations. Volunteer in the community. Give back. Help people give back, because that can help build that sense of belonging. People need to have a sense of belonging to something larger than themselves, and that includes family members within your community that may be struggling. Reward yourself for the work that you've done. Make a gratitude list. And remember that all feelings eventually pass. I think that that's a wonderful suggestion. I love this. I thank them. They don't know I was using it, but I put it in here anyway because I think it's so good. There's just some other self-care tips. Attend meetings, attend a family program, seek out new activities and skills, check your emotions. Those are things that not only should the caregivers themselves do, but the family members and your professionals can do that, and look at that within your community. But I want to leave this just really real quick. I've shared this before, but I think that as we move forward, it's important. Tell your story, shout it, write it, whisper it if you have to, but tell it. Some won't understand it. Some will outright reject it, but many will thank you for it. And then the most magical thing will happen. One by one, voices will start whispering, "Me too." And your tribe will gather, and you will never feel alone again. For family members, that's important. Tell the story, whisper, "Me too," because oftentimes you think you're the only person living in this chaos. But if we share our stories, we're not ever going to be alone again. I wish you people all a wonderful holiday. We're going to be doing Here Come the Holidays, looking at traditions and rituals again next Monday if you're interested. And I really appreciate the fact that you were here. And there will be a survey as we shut down, and I will be sending you your certification form and information about Ross Councils and other information of things that are coming. So thank you so much. I appreciate every one of you and the work that you do. Bye. Thanks, Leanna.